bring you some breaking news. This regards the results of an investigation into alleged Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. The investigation has been completed. The report findings are out. The investigation was conducted by the Prime Minister's ethics advisor, and it says that there will be no further action taken against the Minister Mark Spencer after this investigation. It has cleared him of breaching the rules over the sacking of Tory colleague Nusrat Ghani. Nusrat Ghani had claimed that she was sacked as a minister for being Muslim. The Prime Minister asked his ethics advisor to take over this investigation. Nusrat Ghani made the accusations in January of last year. Let's bring in our political correspondent Rob Powell, who has been following this and has the results of this report. Just remind us the background first and what the report has found.
Yeah, so the background to this is that when Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, he carried out a mini reshuffle of his ministerial team in February 2020. And Ms Ghani, who was at that point serving as a transport minister, essentially lost her job. Now, Ms Ghani was the first female Muslim minister to speak from the dispatch box in the House of Commons. She was the first female Muslim Tory MP to be elected as well. Now, fast forward 2 years to January 2022 last year, and she told the Sunday Times that as part of meetings around that reshuffle 2 years earlier, she had been told that her, and I'm quoting here, Muslimness was raised when she was removed from that job, and that her position as a female Muslim minister was making some colleagues feel uncomfortable. Now, shortly after she made those comments, the chief whip at the time, essentially the government's chief enforcer, Mark Spencer, identified himself as the person that Ms Ghani was referring to. He went onto Twitter to do that, but also vehemently denied that he made those comments and said that he considered them to be defamatory. Now, after various inquiries were commissioned from there, it ended up in the hands of Sir Laurie Magnus, who is the current Prime Minister's ethics advisor, and his report that has gone to Rishi Sunak has just been published along with Rishi Sunak's response. And essentially, the conclusion from Sir Laurie Magnus is that he was unable to definitively say what actually happened, that essentially Mark Spencer and Ms Ghani don't disagree that they met on 2 occasions, that they provided evidence connected to their recollections of those meetings, but ultimately their recollections differ quite substantially. I can read you part of the conclusions that Sir Laurie Magnus came to. He says, having carefully reviewed the information submitted to this investigation, it's clear that both Ms Ghani and Mr Spencer have firm but very different recollections of their 2 meetings during March 2020, and both have offered evidence to support their respective accounts. I've concluded, in the light of this conflicting evidence, it's not possible to determine what transpired in the 2 meetings, particularly the first meeting on the 4th of March 2020, which was not independently witnessed. Now, Sir Laurie Magnus does also say in his findings that he's found no evidence to suggest that negative comments about Ms Ghani's faith were either made or had any resonance in the actual discussions that took place in the lead up to that government reshuffle. He did, though, put his finger on what he called shortcomings in the way that Ms Ghani's complaints and concerns were handled at the time about some of the statements that Mark Spencer made on Twitter, and also some of the information that Mark Spencer, as Chief Whip, gave to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson at the time. Now, Rishi Sunak replied to Laurie Magnus essentially because the Prime Minister is the final arbiter of the ministerial code, so he gets this report and then essentially decides if he thinks the ministerial code has been broken and if the person concerned should stay in their job. Remember, Mark Spencer is a serving government minister, albeit an environment minister now, rather than Chief Whip. And in the letter that Rishi Sunak has sent back to Sir Laurie Magnus that's also been published, he said, in the absence of clear evidence, it would not be right to take further action. I've spoken to both ministers and encouraged them to heed your advice to pull together in the finest tradition of public service. So essentially a suggestion in there that Sir Laurie Magnus can't find any evidence to back up these claims from Ms Ghani, but equally he's very clear in this that he is simply not able to come to a definitive conclusion about what happened. And I think in the absence of any clear conclusion from Sir Laurie Magnus, Rishi Sunak has decided that no action should be taken, that Mark Spencer should be allowed to stay in his ministerial job. We wait to see, of course, what Ms Ghani, who is also a serving minister in Rishi Sunak's government, has to say about that and whether she's satisfied about the conclusion of this inquiry.
And Rob, will anything happen now, or is this matter a line being drawn under it? Because Ms Ghani has since been brought back into the government as a business minister. Is that right? Where are the two involved parties at the moment, and could anything continue from this point on?
So Ms Ghani is a business minister, yes. Mark Spencer is a minister in the Environment Department. I believe he's Foods Minister at the moment. In terms of official processes and bodies that complaints could be made to, I don't think there is anywhere else that Ms Ghani, in theory, could go. I guess this now becomes a question politically whether Ms Ghani is happy that enough has been looked into, whether this matter has been taken seriously enough. At the time when these allegations first surfaced, she says that she was worried that essentially the government wasn't taking these accusations serious enough. And remember, accusations of Islamophobia within the Conservative Party are nothing new. There has been several of them floating around for quite a while now, and several concerned voices, even within the party, talking about whether the party has really gripped the issue with the firmness that it should. This will now clearly be a decision for Ms Ghani about whether she is satisfied with the outcome of this and whether she is satisfied with Rishi Sunak's handling of this. I think the tone of the letter from Rishi Sunak suggests that maybe she is, because Rishi Sunak suggests that he has spoken to both of them and urged them to pull together in the finest traditions of public service. But I think a lot will hinge on what Ms Ghani says now. Obviously, if she is not, if she feels so strongly about this investigation and whether it has gone far enough in her view, she would of course have the option of resigning her post from the government, albeit at the moment that doesn't seem to be on the table. But I think really a lot hinges on what Ms Ghani says now in response to this investigation and in response to what Rishi Sunak has done, in him saying that he doesn't think that any further action is required.
Rob, thank you. Rob Powell, the latest there on that breaking news.